Hi, this is Julien with Cowbird Sound. Back to some mixing tips and tricks. Today we're looking at a live session of Snooty Warren for the Cowbird Live series, which you can find on Spotify, YouTube. This is a great video if you're just getting your bearings on mixing. We're going to go through a lot of the basics and we're going to move super quick. The first thing we're going to do is normalize a lot of these waveforms. Sometimes when you're recording things, there's going to be some headroom. You're going to end up with some of these small waveforms, which are not desirable for mixing because you can get a lot of noise out of a plugin as a result of trying to boost up the gain that way. I always find the cleanest way to do it is to go up here to Audio Suite, and under Other, you're going to find Normalize. Normalize will let you set the peak to whatever you want. So if you want the peak to be -1, that gives you 1 dB of headroom, and then you can click on each of these tracks and render it. The peak of the waveform is now -1 dB, so it's not going to go into the red over here, but it is going to be easier to mix, and you're going to have a lot more control with this volume knob right here. So we're just going to go through and do that for all of the tracks. This is a great skill to use just right at the beginning of mixing, so that way you don't end up with +12 dB on your volume knob here, or a bunch of gain coming from a noisy plugin. The next thing I'm going to do is some creative mixing to these drums, so I'm just going to throw on an EQ. I like to use real-time audio EQ because you can see what the actual audio is. So I'm just going to do a high shelf here. This is going to cut out some of the highs once again. This is just creative mixing. What I'm trying to do is leave room for the vocals to sit on top. That's all the high end you really need out of a drum machine. A little bit of distortion. So I'm going to use this Eddie Kramer drum plugin. What's nice about this is it is capable of doing some compression as well as a little bit of EQ work. It adds a unique character and really worth checking out if you don't have this in your arsenal of plugins already. I want to peak the plugin. I really want to hear whatever harmonics are being added from the actual distortion from the Eddie Kramer plugin. Next, I'm going to throw in a little room reverb because this is a DI instrument. It's really dry. True verb is nice because you get these early reflections and you can see the actual room size and change the distance. And then you see the pre-delay before the actual reverb kicks in. You can get away with some really cool effects with this plugin, so I'd highly recommend using it for recreating the sound of a room. One thing to look out for would be this phase cancellation on the kick drum. So you look at these early reflections, these are delays. I like these, but when you have large waveforms like the kick drum, you can sometimes end up harming your mix. I want you to hear what I mean. So this is without these early reflections, and then listen to it with, and listen to that low end. Really messy. So we're going to take that out, but I'm going to keep some of this reverb in because it gives a nice sense of space. The next thing I'm going to do, and once again we're just doing creative mixing here, is I'm going to add a plate reverb. I like these Abbey Road plates. I'm gonna throw them all over this mix because I just think they sound fantastic. I'm gonna throw a pre-delay on there of probably 90 milliseconds. This is 100% wet. I always figure out the percentage after I get the desired effect. I love the way that that creates this ambiance and this glue. It's really going to take these vacuum sealed electronic drums and give them a sense of character and space. So moving on to the guitar, let's listen to what we have so far. The guitar is sounding good. There's a couple little EQ adjustments that I want to make. This was just a microphone on a guitar amp. Let's go through and see what we want to carve out of this EQ. I'm hearing something I don't like right up around 4K. That little tinging sound is really getting on my nerves. I'm going to cut that out. It removed some of the high-end character, so I'm going to punch a little bit of that up. And then the other thing I want to do to this guitar is remove some of the boxiness. Typically when somebody says a mix sounds boxy, they're talking about the 500 hertz range. There is one last thing I want to do, which is I want to cut out a lot of this dead space down at the bottom. There is no guitar below 70 hertz. So we're going to remove that just so that way gives me some peace of mind. Next, I'm going to add in a little bit of harmonic distortion, and I'm actually going to use that same Eddie Kramer plugin this time on the guitar to create some harmonic distortion. I don't want to mess with the EQ. What I do want to get out of it is a little bit of character. And I also don't want to use this as a compressor. Here it is without that harmonic distortion, just so you can see what it's adding. And here it is with. I think it gives it a nice vintage feel, something that feels a little bit retro. It adds some nice high mids that I think really complement this particular guitar tone. Next, I'm going to do some compression. I'm going to use my Fairchild compressor. The Fairchild compressor is typically used for vocals. That's its bread and butter, but I will use it on just about everything. I'm going to listen to the loudest part of the guitar. It helps me set the threshold so you're not hearing that needle get buried, as they say. Next, I am going to listen to one of the softer sections of the guitar. I like what that compressor's doing. I think it sounds good. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to go a little crazy with reverbs. By that, I mean I am going to put reverb on the actual guitar track and then send it to additional reverbs. And some of these are going to get a little bit creative. This is a mono signal, so I'm going to keep the reverb that I put on this track mono and keep it mostly dry, but that's once I've dialed in the sound. I love the way that sounds. So the next thing I'm going to do is send it to two different stereo aux tracks used for reverb. The first one I am going to call Guitar High Verb. For this first one, we're going to get a little bit creative. So I'm going to create track sends to go to both of these auxiliary sends. I am going to send this at unity, meaning at 0. To this other track. Then I am going to send it to a plate reverb with a lot of high end. So just like that, but now I am going to EQ after the reverb. And the effect I'm going to get here is I'm going to cut out all of the low information. Now you can hear the shimmer that this is added on top of the guitar. This is an effect that you dial in by taste. So now I take this volume knob here and I bring that down until I feel it's adding something good and not overwhelming the mix. Muted. Unmuted. It adds some subtlety, some high end. Once again, we're just getting into a little bit of creative mixing here. Next, I'm going to do this straightaway guitar reverb. I'm going to use a pretty handy dandy reverb called R-verb. It's a little bit darker and it has a little bit more of a digital character to it. So all I'm doing is I'm increasing the pre-delay up to around 100 milliseconds. It's kind of a long pre-delay, but we already have a couple reverbs on this guitar, so this one is essentially the sound of it hitting the back of the auditorium in a larger venue. Because this plugin is on an auxiliary send, we're going to keep this wet dry knob at 100. The way that you change the amount of this effect on the track itself is going to be with this fader here. This is our send fader. Right now, none of it is going to that reverb, and as we bring it up, you'll start to hear the effect. And that works for me. A nice, dreamy, ethereal guitar to go with the ethereal drums. So now moving on to the Hammond organ, I am going to listen to what I have here. It looks like I have stereo, left and right recording of the Wesley cabinet, and one bass mic, which picked up a lot of that meat and the low end. So I want to hear what those sound like separately. This is just the top end. Sounds good to me. Then let me hear the bass. Yeah, so we're definitely going to need a good amount of that bass because that is actually serving as the bass in this particular arrangement. So now I've made a track called Hammond Bus. I am going to send both of these to the Hammond Bus. The recording sounds great as it is. I'm going to do a little bit of EQ work. I'm going to use this word again. I think it's sounding a little bit boxy. It's not so much the 500 range though, it's a little bit lower. You can see it here on the screen. That stuff right there is not desirable. I'm going to cut some of that out. And I don't miss it all. So now I think what it's missing is a good amount of high end. That sounds good to me, but there's some little percussive noises way at the top that I think are going to fight with the vocals when we get to them at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and nip that in the bud and just cut those out with a low pass filter. Once again, I don't miss those frequencies, right? There is, however, something sticking out to me, and that's right around that 4K range as well. You hear that whistling noise right there. I want to cut that out. And that should clean it right up. If there's anything else I want to do here, it's maybe give the bass a little bit of a boost. And maybe some of these high mids a boost. Next, we're going to move on to compression. Because this is a complex instrument that is serving as both the bass and a large part of the meat of this song, I don't want to just send it to a single band compressor. I'm going to do multi-band compression, and I'll explain what that means. C4 is a classic multi-band compressor that I believe comes with the Waves bundle. It's a really great workhorse multi-band compressor. As you can see, it's separated into 4 different sections of the frequencies here. Each one is being compressed differently. So I'm going to adjust what I want those parameters to be. I want a little bit of control over everything below 200 Hertz. I want control of everything between 200 and 2K. And I want control of everything between 2K and 8K, and then everything above that. So I'm going to treat each of those sections differently, and I'll solo them so you can hear what's going on. This is the low band of the compressor. I'm going to set my threshold so it's doing a little bit of work down here and keeping the bass nice and consistent. But I'm also going to give it a little bit of a bump, and then we're going to work on the low mid band. We don't need to do as much work there. I'm going to tame the 2K to 8K range simply because I don't want it fighting with the electric guitar or the vocals, which both live up there. And then let's work on the high end. And all of that is sounding very good to me. I'm going to bring the master down a little bit, and the reason why is because I have added some dBs down here in the low end. I don't want this plugin to clip and create distortion. All right, so moving on to the Fender Rhodes here. This is obviously recorded DI as well. The best thing to do with a Fender Rhodes is bring out some of that high, tinny attack sound because it really helps it cut through a mix. Next, I'm going to cut out some of these low mids because I don't want it to sound too muddy. We've already established that the bass is being taken care of by the Hammond. Nice. Now we're just going to do a little bit of compression with the Fairchild compressor. Nice, that's sounding like it will cut through the mix to me. Once again, we're just working really quickly here. So the last thing we are going to do is work on the vocals.
I guess this is the end of the world. Why don't we meet up at the park? And don't you know they are my favorite girl?
So these vocals are live. You can hear the guitar in the background of that room. You can also hear some of the effect of the Rhodes, and probably this Hammond will come through in the chorus. The first thing I'm going to do before I do anything is get rid of some of the sibilants, some of these popping sounds with B, P, S. Those sounds, as we compress it, are going to go out of control. I'm going to use this sibilants plugin.
We're together, don't you wish we had a...
This knob right here on the sibilants compressor sets the threshold, because you'll see these numbers go down. It may look like you're reducing volume. That's not what's happening. You're setting the threshold, which means if you set it really low, it will be activated by more things in the vocals. And if you set it really high, it will only be activated by the sharpest of S's and things like that. And I'm going to cut out maybe around 15 decibels.
I guess this is the end of the world.
And that sounds good to me. Now we're going to do a little bit of EQ work. So I'm going to pull out, once again, my F6 real-time audio floating band compressor.
I guess this is the end of the world.
First thing I want to do, cut out any unnecessary low-end information.
I guess this is the end of the world.
The next thing I want to do is cut out some of that boxiness. There's a little bit much happening around that 500 hertz range.
I guess this is the end of the world. Why don't we meet up at the park?
I'll show you what I'm listening to.
I guess this is the end of the world.
That stuff right there.
I guess this is the end of the world.
Additionally, I think you could cut out a good amount of this low mid and low end information.
I guess this is the end of the world.
The other thing that bothers me a little bit about this microphone is it is a little strong in the 1 to 2K range.
I guess this is the end of the world. Why don't we meet up at the park? I guess this is the end of the world.
We've done a little bit of EQ work here and everything is sounding better to me. The next thing I want to do is start my compressing and limiting. So the first thing I'm going to do is use my Fairchild compressor because that is the best compressor to use on vocals in my opinion. I keep that time constant down at 1 just so that way it has a fast attack and fast release.
We can sit and watch the city go dark.
And then the last thing I want to do is do some limiting before we dive into the world of vocal reverbs. For this, I'm going to find the loudest part of the vocals and set the levels based on that part.
We're together, don't you wish we had a...
One thing that's important to watch with the limiter is to make sure it doesn't go below -6 dB. If you're doing more than -6 of gain reduction with a limiter, you're likely creating a lot of distortion.
Tastes better, split a beer, people gather, aren't you glad? We're together, don't you...
And Then we're going to move on to vocal reverbs. For vocal reverbs, I am going to create 3 auxiliary send tracks. 1 is going to be a room and 2 are going to be plates. I'm going to create a send to go to the room reverb and bring that up to unity while I dial in the desired effect, and then pull it back depending on how much of the effect I want. I'm going to use that true verb. It's really important to bring this direct knob on this true verb plugin all the way down. The reason why is this is the wet dry knob of this plugin, and we don't want any of the dry signal to be in this auxiliary send.
Hello, hello, I'll never.
Once we have the effect we want, we're going to bring this down.
Hello, hello, I'll never say goodbye, baby.
Next, we're going to do the first plate. I am going to take another sibilance plugin and put it on this plate send before I put the reverb on there. And the reason why is I don't want the sibilance from the vocals to be ringing throughout the plate. I am just going to be very aggressive with this because we're just dealing with the sound of reverb. Now I'm going to throw on a plate. We are going to put a pre-delay of around, let's say 90 milliseconds.
Hello, hello, I'll never say goodbye, baby.
I like that effect a lot. We're going to bring the effect down though.
Hello, hello, I'll never say goodbye, baby. But truth be told,
And now we are going to do the same thing to this second plate using that sibilance plugin again. I'm just going to hold Option and drag it to copy paste it with the exact same effects, which is a really aggressive gain reduction. Next, I am going to use another Abbey Roads reverb plate. This one I'm going to put kind of a crazy pre-delay on, 120, 130 milliseconds.
hello, hello, I'll never say goodbye, baby.
And what I'm going to do with this effect is just bring the amount of it down until it just sounds like a really far off distant wall the voice is reflecting off of.
Hello, hello, I'll never say goodbye, baby. But truth be told, I'm in no mood to die lately.
And there we go. Now begins the actual mixing section of mixing all these tracks together. So if I were to take the solo off of these vocals right now, everything is going to be really loud and clip. The reason why is because I've already done all the compression and I began by normalizing the volumes all to -1 dB. So we're going to build them one at a time, starting with the drums. I'm watching this master fader here. I think this is a little bit loud for the drums for a genre like this. It's more of a background instrument. And now let's add in the guitar. And let's add in the Hammond organ. And the Fender Rhodes. And lastly, the vocals.
Something more to say. I know, I know, I know.
The last trick I want to show you is a plugin called the Trim knob. Now I'm going to go into this vocal track here and go to Other, and you're going to see something called Trim. This comes with Pro Tools, so it should be there, I promise. We are going to automate the gain function. of this plugin. And the reason why is I never want to automate this external volume fader, because what if I want more vocals later on? By automating instead just this trim knob, I can work on peaks, and I can also cut out dead air from the vocals. This will take a while to do, so I'm not going to make you watch all of it, but I'll show you just a quick example. This section here, there's no vocals. You can hear the sound of headphones, things like that, and other instruments. We don't need that in the mix. I'm going to bring that all the way down. And then I'm just going to smooth out those transitions. And this is what the effect is overall. It's a nice, easy mixing hack that I highly recommend getting into the habit of doing instead of automating this volume fader here. Anytime you're touching automation on this volume fader, you should know you're doing something wrong. All right, there is a quick and dirty mix of the Cowbird live session of Snooty Warren. If you want to hear the full recording or see the video, I will link them at the end of the video, but you can also find the links in the description below. Be sure to leave a comment, give me a like, let me know what you think. Thanks.
We're together, don't